Hey guys, tonight we slip into the misty highlands of medieval Ethiopia, where you wake not to the buzz of an alarm clock, but to the squabbling of roosters outside your thatched hut. The air is thin and cool, heavy with the scent of damp earth, and wood smoke curling from chimneys. You roll over on your mat, stretch beneath your woven blanket, and listen. Somewhere beyond the eucalyptus grove, someone is already grinding grain. You smell it. The faint tickle of roasted barley and a nose-stinging hint of rock salt. The day is about to begin. You probably won't survive this. Between the high altitudes, the fasting calendars, and the questionable food storage techniques, there's a decent chance you'll start your day with a bellyache, if not full-blown dysentery. Still, this is breakfast in medieval Ethiopia, and it's going to be fascinating. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You swing your legs off the bed, more like a frame made of woven branches, and step barefoot onto the packed earth floor. No slippers, no socks. Just you and the cold morning dust. The first thing you hear is the guttural crow of a rooster perched on the fence post, puffed up like a self-important town crier. And it's not just one bird. It's a whole feathery orchestra announcing the return of light over the escarpment. In this world, dawn isn't a concept. It's a sound, a smell, a pressure behind your eyes as you squint against the sun slinking up over the ridge. Your first task? Head to the salt pouch. A small leather sack tied near the door holds rock salt, precious stuff in this part of the world. You break off a crystal chunk and touch it to your tongue. It's intense, sharp, almost metallic. Salt doesn't just season food here. It preserves, it barters, it purifies. Some folks even tuck tiny fragments in their robes, half spice, half amulet. Out front, your mother is already crouched over the fire pit, blowing gently through a narrow reed to coax the embers back to life. Smoke curls lazily into the air, tickling your nose and giving everything, from your hair to your fingernails, that permanent smoky undertone. You sit beside her, still drowsy, as she stirs something in a clay pot. Maybe it's yesterday's porridge, or maybe it's just water boiling to clean a spoon. Either way, it's hypnotic, and you almost nod off again. But then, the village starts moving. A boy drags a basket full of teff grains to the communal grinding stone, his tunic flapping like a lazy flag. An older woman with silver hoops in her ears sings softly as she gathers kindling. You hear the distant thump of a drum, or maybe it's someone pounding dough. Could be both. Sound carries in strange ways out here. A few steps from your home, goats shuffle and bleat, stamping the earth with impatience. Chickens dart between them, pecking at invisible things in the dust. You might get eggs this morning if the hens weren't so committed to hiding them in ever more ridiculous places. One, notoriously, lays hers atop a slanted beam over the latrine. A little daredevil, that one. Here's a historical fact you can chew on with your breakfast. Salt slabs, especially from the Afar Depression, were sometimes used as currency in medieval Ethiopia. They were called amole, and traders carried them like gold bars, strapped to the backs of camels. It's entirely possible your family's meager breakfast starts with something literally worth its weight in silver, but not all is high stakes. Economic intrigue. You're more concerned with who's going to fetch the morning water. It's a short walk, but you dread it. Down the rocky slope to the stream, with clay jug in hand, dodging brambles and goats the whole way. One time, you slipped and cracked the jug and had to endure 3 full days of mockery from your cousin, who still calls you Jug Slayer. You eventually spot a flicker of movement up the trail. 2 monks from the nearby church, wrapped in soft cotton cloaks, already heading into the fields to bless the crops. You watch them with mild curiosity. They fast more than they feast, those holy men. But rumor has it, quirky, possibly true rumor, they sometimes chew wild herbs in the morning that taste like black licorice and make your dreams extra weird. herbal visions, courtesy of breakfast, and just as you're absorbing that image, you get another whiff. This time, unmistakable. Teff batter. Someone nearby is pouring it in concentric circles onto a clay griddle. You won't eat it yet, not in this section, but the smell wraps around you like a warm scarf. Historians still argue whether most families had regular access to salt or whether it remained the indulgence of the wealthy and well-connected. Some suggest it was more ceremonial than culinary in rural areas like yours. But your family does keep that leather pouch near the door, and that tells you something about priorities. Maybe salt was sacred, or maybe your mother just can't stand. Bland porridge. A shadow passes over you, then another. Birds overhead, heading somewhere fast. The sun is fully up now, burning off the mist. The roosters are mercifully silent, replaced by the soft hiss of boiling water and the distant sound of cattle bells. You scratch your shoulder absently and watch a line of ants march across the doorstep, carrying crumbs of yesterday's injera like prized jewels. Your father emerges with a grunt, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He doesn't say much. Men here don't waste words on mornings. He grabs a twig brush, the kind made from split branches, and begins sweeping the packed dirt outside your hut in long, deliberate strokes. It's almost meditative. You find yourself watching the dust swirl like spirits into the air, dancing up toward the light. And then, without warning, a chicken hops into your lap. It's the daredevil hen. Of course it is. You trudge over to the hearth, still rubbing the sleep from your eyes. There, beside the crackling fire, sits your mother's round clay maitad, its surface already hot and waiting. She ladles a scoop of thin fermented batter from a gourd and pours it onto the griddle in a careful spiral. You lean closer. The scent is instantly familiar, sour, earthy, comforting. This is injera, and this is breakfast. Not just any injera either. This one is made from teff, that tiny iron-rich grain that's native to Ethiopia and still practically a secret outside of it. When the batter hits the mitad, it hisses like a whisper. Tiny bubbles rise and pop, creating a spongy, dimpled surface. She doesn't flip it. That's the point. Injera cooks from one side only, sealing in its tang while the other side stays soft and pillowy. You sit patiently, knowing the first one is always a bit misshapen. Your family calls it the test circle, and you usually get to eat it first. Your sister appears behind you holding a bowl of siljo, a thick mustardy paste made of legumes and spices. It's still warm, and when she peels back the cloth covering the bowl, steam rises like a genie escaping a bottle. She smirks as she drops a blob in the center of the fresh injera. It jiggles a little. The two of you tear off pieces of the bread and scoop it up in careful pinches, using only your right hands, of course. Left-handed scooping? Social death. This might not be the towering Western idea of breakfast. There's no stack of pancakes, no crispy bacon, no cinnamon swirl anything. But this is sustaining. Sour, savory, and satisfying. And the best part is, it's shared. You, your sister, your mother, and whoever else stumbles into the hut this morning will all eat from the same platter. Double dipping is not a sin. Here. It's expected. And the injera itself isn't just food. It's utensil. It's plate. It's tradition. Once the siljo's gone, you keep eating the injera that soaked up its flavor. By the end, the plate is literally consumed. Zero waste, maximum taste. Now, here's a historical nugget. Teff has been cultivated in Ethiopia for over 3,000 years, making it one of the oldest domesticated grains on the planet. Its name supposedly comes from the word teff, meaning lost, which tracks. Teff grains are tiny. Blink, and they vanish into the wind. That also means you're constantly sweeping them off the floor, off the table, out of your sleeves. Your mother jokes that teff has legs. As you chew, the quiet of morning slips away. More villagers are awake now. You hear laughter from the house across the field. Someone must have told the story about the cow that wandered into the chapel again. And in the distance, a young boy chases a donkey that has absolutely no intention of being caught. Classic morning entertainment. but not everyone's enjoying injera today. Some families are fasting, even now. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has a fasting calendar that could intimidate a saint. Nearly 180 days of the year are designated for some kind of fast, which means depending on the season, your neighbor might be sipping a bowl of thin barley gruel instead, his eyes longing for the day when he can once again dunk injera in spiced lentils without divine judgment. Still, breakfast must go on. Injera varies by region. In the highlands, it's usually teff. Down in the lowlands, you'll find more sorghum and barley. And in lean times, whatever grain you have, including wild grass seeds your cousins jokingly call panic grain, because you only eat it when you're desperate. There's a quirky bit of village wisdom that says you should never cook the first batch of injera when you're angry, or it'll turn out bitter. Your aunt swears by it. One time, after a fight with her neighbor, she made a batch so sour it puckered a man's face until he looked like a raisin. She apologized with honey. He forgave her, but still flinches at the word injera. You reach for another piece. It's slightly crisp around the edges, soft in the middle. Perfect. The cilio's mostly gone now, leaving only a smear of yellow in the middle of the platter. You tear off the last piece and wipe it clean like a seasoned pro. Your sister nods. In approval, you didn't even leave a fleck. This is a small win, but you take it. There's debate among historians about whether injera was an everyday meal for peasants or more of a festive food due to the effort required to make it and the scarcity of teff. Some scholars argue that most rural families relied more heavily on boiled grains or thick porridge, only making injera on special occasions. Others suggest that injera, in some form, was always present. Maybe thinner, maybe less fermented, maybe made from lesser grains, but a constant nonetheless. But as you sit there, warm injera in your belly, it doesn't feel rare. It feels like a ritual, a rhythm, a morning heartbeat. You glance at your mother, still tending the fire, and your sister, now licking mustardy cilio from her fingers. The morning sun streams through the open doorway, casting golden streaks across the dirt floor. Somewhere outside, the rooster crows again, late to his own party. Then, just as you're thinking about licking your fingers too, a goat sticks its head through the window and bleats loud enough to make you jump. Breakfast isn't over. It's just under siege. You swat gently at the goat's nose, no real conviction behind it, and it retreats with a snort, unimpressed, and probably planning its next attempt. Your sister laughs, and your mother mutters something about building a better gate before the livestock start doing the cooking too. You're full now, the warm glow of injera and cilio settling into your belly like an old friend. But that doesn't mean breakfast is over, because today your uncle is visiting. And your uncle, well, he's connected. He serves at a noble's, estate a few valleys over, where breakfast doesn't just fill your stomach, it dazzles your soul. And rumor has it he's brought something rare, something sticky, golden, and worth its weight in gossip. Honey. Your ears perk up before you even see him. There's that exaggerated throat clearing outside the hut, his signature entrance. Moments later, the door curtain twitches, and in he strolls, robes just slightly too fine for a farming village and a wooden bowl in both hands. Everyone gravitates toward him like bees to a blossom. And speaking of bees, oh yes, you smell it before he even opens the lid. Raw honey, not the thick processed kind you might squeeze out of a bear-shaped bottle. This is the real stuff, pale amber, slightly cloudy, and still clinging to bits of comb like it doesn't want to let go. You lean in and it hits you, rich, floral, faintly smoky, with that hint of wildness only bees can deliver. You could write a poem about it. You won't, but you could. He sets the bowl on the floor with a flourish, winks at you, and lifts a sticky spoonful into the air. The strand stretches like golden silk before it finally breaks and drizzles into a bowl of warm flatbread someone has quickly offered up. The honey seeps into the spongy texture, creating a shimmering mosaic that honestly looks too pretty to eat. But you eat it anyway. Of course you do. And wow. It's sweet without being cloying, fragrant like wildflowers, and just complex enough that you find yourself chewing slowly, as if your tongue is trying to decipher a riddle. You glance at your mother, Her eyebrows say, "Don't get used to this." Message received. Here's something sweet for your brain. Ethiopia is one of the oldest honey-producing regions in the world. Archaeological evidence suggests honey was harvested here over 3,000 years ago. In fact, honey has played a major role in Ethiopian society for centuries, not just in the kitchen, but in medicine, rituals, and of course, the brewing of teji, that famously potent honey wine. You're not getting a sip of that at breakfast, unfortunately, but the honey alone is intoxicating enough. Your uncle dips his spoon again, then pauses midair to regale you all with a new story. This one about how the lady of the estate prefers her honey infused with cinnamon bark, and how her cooks whisper to the bees to make it taste better. You're not sure you believe that part, but you love how he tells it. Voice low, eyes wide, as if revealing state secrets between bites. Do bees prefer talking to men or women? Your sister asks, dead serious. Your uncle doesn't miss a beat. Women! Bees hate drama. The room laughs, including your mother, though she tries to hide it behind a spoonful of honey. For a fleeting moment, it feels like the hut has doubled in size, filled not just with bodies, but with warmth, sweetness, and the magic of food. That isn't just nourishing, but rare. Special. But of course, not all honey is created equal. In some regions, people still keep bees in hollowed-out logs or clay jars, perched high in trees to protect them from pests and thieves. Some even climb barefoot to harvest it, risking broken bones for breakfast. That's devotion. Or madness. Maybe both. There's a quirky little tradition, too. Some villagers believe if a bee lands on your forehead while you're eating honey, it's a sign you'll live a long, prosperous life. If it lands on your nose, it means you talk too much. So naturally, everyone's eyeing the bees buzzing through the open window, silently betting where they'll land. Yours chooses your shoulder. Neutral ground. You feel smug about it. Now, here's where it gets sticky. Pun fully intended. Historians still argue whether honey was a widespread peasant delicacy or mostly reserved for elites and ceremonies. Some evidence suggests noble. Estates had entire beekeeping systems, while others argue that wild honey was regularly foraged by anyone brave enough to fight a hive with smoke and a stick. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Access varied wildly by region, status, and season. But today, thanks to your uncle and a dangerously talented group of bees, you're having the breakfast of royalty. And even though you'll go back to porridge tomorrow, today's flavor will linger in your memory like a sweet afterthought. The honey bowl makes its rounds. Everyone gets a bite. Even the neighbor's child, who wandered in uninvited but expertly timed. No one minds. That's how it works here. Food is to be shared, especially the good stuff, especially the things you don't always get, especially the ones that taste like sunshine spun into gold. Your uncle stands and wipes his sticky hands on the hem of his robe, an offense your mother pretends not to notice. He nods toward the door. Off to the market. Tell the bees thank you if they visit again. Then he's gone, leaving behind nothing but an empty bowl, a warm glow in your belly, and a lingering drop of honey clinging to the corner of your mouth. You lick it off. Breakfast isn't just sustenance. Sometimes it's storytelling. Sometimes it's shared laughter. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it's a spoonful of sunlight brought down from the trees. Your mother wipes the table with a damp cloth made from old flax, then tosses the crumbs to a roaming chicken pecking at the doorway. It struts away as if it's earned something. You stretch, feeling the satisfying heaviness of a full belly, and the slow pull of a warm morning creeping into afternoon. But breakfast isn't always this generous. In fact, it usually isn't, because most days, you eat what you've got, and that often means genfo. Genfo is the kind of food that doesn't come to impress. It shows up like an old friend in worn boots, solid and predictable. And let's be honest, it's basically a hot scoop of barley glue. But oh, it's good glue. Made from barley or sometimes wheat flour, genfo is stirred until it's dense, doughy, and ready to be formed into a thick round dome with a neat little well at the center. Think edible volcano. That center crater? It's where the magic lives. Usually, your mother spoons in a fiery mix of clarified butter and berber, the famous Ethiopian spice blend that has probably reduced stronger men than you to tears. She melts it into the genfo's center until it glows red and golden like magma. Then she passes it to you and your siblings with one rule: everyone eats from the outside in, dipping carefully without collapsing the structure. Collapse it early and, well, someone has to clean up. That someone is usually you. Today, though, you're just watching, still full from injera and honey. Your younger brother is the one wrestling with his portion. He scoops from the edge, rolls the sticky dough between his fingers like a pro, then dips it cautiously into the sizzling butter spice core. He winces, just slightly as the spice hits. Your mother chuckles. "Too much berber builds character," she says. "That's questionable." Still, it's not just a food, it's a whole ritual. There's something bonding about everyone eating from the same round of genfo, dipping carefully, keeping the butter well from spilling too soon. In some homes, elders say that a genfo shared is a grudge softened, especially when served with black coffee brewed over open flame, thick and smoky enough to make your eyes water before you even sip. But here's the twist. While barley is king in the highlands, down in the south, genfo might be made from enset flour, the infamous false banana plant. It's fermented underground for weeks, even months, and then turned into a thick paste or flatbread. Some folks say it smells like cheese and destiny. Others say it just smells. Either way, it's a local staple and packed with calories, which you need when your day involves hauling water or herding goats across miles of rocky terrain. One quirky old tale claims that the longer you stir genfo without switching arms, the better your firstborn's memory will be. You've seen grown men rotate the pot like warriors in battle, refusing to hand over the stirring stick just to improve their hypothetical child's exam scores. Science? No. Commitment? Absolutely. And yes, historians still argue whether genfo was truly an everyday food in medieval Ethiopian homes, or more of a strategic meal, something made in bulk during fasting periods or when energy was needed for planting, harvesting, or long travel. The consistency alone, dense and slow digesting, suggests it was designed to stick with you through heavy labor. Some scholars think it was primarily a peasant food, while others believe it was common across classes but with more elaborate toppings for the elite. For you, it's just breakfast, or sometimes dinner in disguise. Genfo also plays a quiet role in Ethiopian hospitality. If a visitor arrives during the early hours and the household doesn't have time for a full meal, someone might quickly whip up genfo as a placeholder gesture of welcome. Fast to make, slow to eat, perfect for filling time and tummies alike. The visiting aunties always say the same thing. The genfo tastes better than the gossip. Then they gossip anyway. Today's batch is extra garlicky, your mother insists. It keeps the colds away. Or maybe it keeps nosy neighbors from lingering too long. Either way, it's working. Even the dog, normally glued to the doorway, is keeping a cautious distance. There's something oddly meditative about watching your brother roll each bite between his palms, careful not to waste a drop of the center sauce. The food is humble, sure, but the technique, that's art. It's also messy. He drops a glob on his tunic, then tries to wipe it off with his sleeve, which predictably makes it worse. Your mother sighs like a woman who's fought this war before and already knows she'll lose. You pick up a piece yourself, just a small one, and dunk it. The butter's cooled, but the spice still hits with that warm, back-of-the-throat heat that makes you exhale slowly. It's not exciting, it's not fancy, but it's filling, and on lean days, it's all that stands between hunger and hope. You remember your grandfather once saying, "If genfo is boring, you're not hungry enough." Harsh, but also probably true. Outside, the sun's getting higher. You hear bells ringing from the church in the valley below, a signal that morning prayers are over. Some families might break a short fast now, scooping genfo from clay bowls while talking about dreams and chores and weather patterns like they're sacred texts. And honestly, maybe they are. Because in this world, food is never just food. It's medicine, it's community, it's discipline, it's hope. Even a sticky mound of barley dough, eaten in silence with family, can feel like a form of gratitude carved into the rhythm of the day. So you watch your family eat. You smell the smoky butter, the citrusy whiff of fresh Berber. You sip a little leftover coffee from a chipped gourd. The goat is back at the window, chewing something that definitely used to be someone's sandal. And you think breakfast might not be glamorous, but it matters. You wake the next morning to the sound of birds with opinions. Loud ones. There's a steady thumping from the outer yard, too. Someone's working the millstone already. You rub your eyes, kick off the blanket made from woven sheep's wool, and stretch just enough to hear your shoulders crack like old kindling. Today feels different. There's a smell in the air. Not smoke, not spice, but something grainy and sharp, like the tang of fresh dough just before it's cooked. That can only mean one thing. Tihlo. Yes, the humble, oddly satisfying, and deeply hands-on breakfast known as tihlo. And today, apparently, you're making it. You step outside and see your cousin kneeling beside a wide, shallow basket. She's rolling little dough balls, round as quail eggs, between her palms with the efficiency of someone who could probably do it blindfolded. It's barley dough, cooled, stiffened, and slightly salted. She drops each finished ball into a large clay dish until they're piled up like the world's driest cereal. You grab a handful and start rolling. Your shapes come out more like pebbles than pearls. She raises an eyebrow. "They're not going to fight lions," she says. "Make them gentler." Okay, fair. Now tihlo isn't just a breakfast, it's a conversation. A shared meal where the eating is practically ceremonial. You and your cousin bring the dough balls inside, set them in the center of a circle of waiting relatives, and then your aunt appears with a thick stew of spiced meat and onions still bubbling. She spoons it into the center of the dish, right over the dough balls. The steam fogs up the air like a spice-scented cloud. The next part? Skewers. Every person grabs one, thin wooden sticks, sharpened on one end, held delicately like chopsticks designed by medieval carpenters. With practiced ease, your uncle spears a dough ball, dunks it in the sauce, gives it a tiny swirl, and pops it into his mouth. He chews. He sighs. He looks dramatically skyward like he's tasting divinity itself. Show off. You try your own. The dough has a subtle tang from the barley, barely fermented maybe, and soaks up the sauce like a sponge. The stew, rich with onions, garlic, and chili, bursts over your tongue, and the softness of the dough smooths it all out. It's hearty, it's hot, it's oddly elegant for something you're eating with sticks on the floor. Here's your mainstream historical gem for today. Tilo originates in the Tigray region of northern Ethiopia and is one of the few Ethiopian dishes eaten exclusively, with skewers rather than fingers or bread. It started as a special occasion food, often served at weddings, festivals, or post-fast celebrations, but has since become more common in certain households. Still, it's rare to see it outside the north. That makes today's breakfast kind of a treat. But wait, there's more. Tihlo has a surprising political past. During the 20th century, Tigrayan intellectuals used it as a symbol of cultural pride. In university cafeterias, ordering tilo was a quiet nod to ethnic identity in a space dominated by Southern and Central food norms. Imagine asserting your heritage not with slogans, but with skewers. Of course, not everyone agrees on Tihlo's origin story. Historians still argue whether the dish evolved from communal war rations, simple balls of portable barley, or if it was always meant for gatherings and celebration. Some say it was born in the mountains as a way to stretch scarce meat. Others claim it was a nobleman's novelty, designed to slow down greedy eaters. Either way, you're not complaining. And it's fun. There's something satisfying about spearing a little dough orb, dipping it just right, and landing it cleanly in your mouth like a tiny edible prize. Your cousin challenges you to eat 3 in a row without touching your lips. You fail instantly. Everyone laughs. Also, quirky fact incoming, There's an old Tigrayan joke that if someone drops a Tilo ball more than 3 times, they're not ready for marriage. You're now on drop number 4. Your cousin looks at you with mock concern. Maybe next year, she whispers. The sauce begins to thicken as it cools, clinging tighter to each bite. The dough balls soften slightly, growing easier to pierce. Your uncle shifts the dish a little closer to himself under the guise of better sharing, but everyone knows what he's doing. No one calls him on it. Yet. Outside, someone starts humming a lullaby even though it's mid-morning. The room quiets into that peaceful haze that follows a shared meal. Half conversation, half digestion. Your aunt brings in warm water in a clay jug for everyone to wash their fingers, even though technically the skewers kept them clean. It's more about the gesture, the full circle of hosting, and for all its simplicity, Tilo sticks with you. Maybe it's the barley, dense and grounding, or maybe it's the rhythm of the meal, the stab, the dip, the chew, like some slow edible drumbeat that reminds you. Food is about patience, presence, and sometimes poking your breakfast with sharp sticks. As the last dough balls vanish, your cousin leans in and whispers, "If you're smart, you save 2 in your sleeve. Midnight Tilo is better than love." Noted. You leave the circle with a full stomach and a warm chest. Breakfast today didn't just feed you, it gathered you, held you in a quiet little ritual. And sure, maybe you're still bad at rolling dough, but you're getting better at sitting still, at listening, at letting food become more than flavor. Because sometimes the best mornings are the ones where you don't do much of anything, just dip, chew, and breathe. The following morning, you wake to the low clink of metal spoons on ceramic. Not the hollow clang of cooking pots, but the soft, precise sound of something being stirred. Gently, rhythmically. You sit up, still wrapped in your wool blanket, and breathe in deep. There it is. Sweet, nutty, almost creamy in its warmth. It smells like a hug made of grains. Welcome to the land of kinche. Now kinche is your comfort breakfast. No fire-mouthed spice, no complicated skewers, no structural engineering. Just cracked wheat boiled to a soft, fluffy texture, then seasoned with niter kiba, clarified butter steeped with herbs, and a bit of salt. Sometimes your mother throws in a pinch of cardamom, sometimes not. Either way, it always hits the same soft, snoozy note. Think oatmeal, but with ambition. You shuffle into the main room, blinking at the filtered sunlight. Your little sister is already halfway through her bowl, grains clinging to her chin like she's grown a breakfast beard. She's got that dreamy, full-belly glaze in her eyes, which tells you one thing. Today's kimchi is top tier. Your mother hands you your bowl. She's stirred the butter through so thoroughly it's gleaming at the edges, and there's a satisfying fluffiness to the whole thing, as if each grain decided to rise to the occasion. You take your first bite, soft, rich, a little toasty at the edges from where it was finished near the coals. You sigh. Mainstream history time. Kimchi has been a cornerstone of Ethiopian breakfast for centuries, favored especially by Orthodox Christian communities during non-fasting periods. It's nutritious, filling, and easy to prepare in bulk. Medieval, Highland households often made it using bulgur or coarsely cracked wheat, soaked overnight for efficiency, then boiled in water or milk if it was available. Sometimes sorghum or barley made cameo appearances too, depending on the region and the season. But here's the fringe twist. Some oral traditions claim kimchi was originally a night food, eaten by guards and watchmen who needed something. Warm, simple, and quick to digest without putting them to sleep. It was only later adopted by families for the morning table. Others say it's always been a waking food, meant to reset the body after night prayers and long dreams. Historians still argue whether kimchi was widely consumed by the nobility or if it was more a peasant's dish. Some suggest that its simplicity made it beneath the palace table, while others argue that noble kitchens valued it for how well it could absorb expensive butter and spices, becoming a sort of culinary canvas for wealth. Either way, today it's yours. And the best part? It doesn't ask anything of you. No spicy regrets, no chewing challenges, Just warm grain and quiet satisfaction. Your brother tries to show off by eating his kimchi with a wooden spoon he carved himself. It's twice the size. It needs to be, and shaped like a ladle for a mythical ox, but hey, he's proud. Your mother pretends not to laugh. There's a rhythm to kimchi mornings. Someone's always stirring. Someone else is always complaining that the butter wasn't enough. Next time, use a whole ladle, mother. Someone's chasing a toddler trying to use the bowl as a drum. The meal takes on this low domestic hum. Comfortable, reassuring. The kind of background noise that, if you moved away, would echo in your head every time you smelled cooked grain. You finish your bowl slowly, chewing longer than you need to. Because the longer it lasts, the longer you stay warm. That's the secret charm of kimchi. It doesn't punch you awake. It wraps around you like fog, seeping into your bones. And on feast days, it gets dressed up. You've seen versions where raisins and roasted nuts are tossed in. Some families drizzle a little honey on top. For the children, they say before eating it themselves. If there's leftover kimchi, it's pressed into a pan later in the day, fried until crisp around the edges, and eaten with sour yogurt. Breakfast, Part 2. Today, your cousin pops in from next door, eyes wide, bowl already half filled. "I heard there's extra butter," she says, shameless. Your mother nods and adds a dollop straight into her bowl. Your cousin sighs. "The angels are real," she whispers. There's an old saying you vaguely remember from your grandmother. A pot of kimchi calms 3 tempers and fills 4 bellies. Not bad odds. The wind shifts outside. You catch the scent of rain in the distance, maybe a light drizzle coming in over the hills. That means slippery footpaths, muddy fields, slower chores. But it also means the fires stay lit longer, the kitchens warmer. On days like this, you'll come back in from work and there'll be leftover kimchi waiting in a clay pot, slightly crispy where it sat too long, with a line of yellow butter melting through the center like a sleepy lightning bolt. Final quirky note, in some monasteries, kimchi was served with crushed rue or wild thyme mixed in, believed to help monks focus during long readings. You once tried the rue version. It tasted like someone cooked breakfast in a garden and forgot to leave the flowers outside. Respectfully, not your thing. Your bowl's empty. Your mother raises an eyebrow, offer for seconds. You shake your head, already full. Your sister is licking the spoon. Your brother's carving a second, even bigger spoon. Your cousin's gone back for thirds. You lean back against the wall, letting the heat settle in your chest. Outside, the birds are quieter now, the clouds pulling a gray shawl over the sky. The day's about to begin in full. Chores, fetching, sweeping, and maybe a little gossip if you time the water trip just right. But inside, you feel still, anchored. Grains and butter, slow breath and warm hands. You don't know what tomorrow's breakfast will be, but today you had kimchi, and that's enough. The sun's barely up, but the clatter of hooves is already echoing through the highland paths. Someone's leading a pack mule past your house, and the beast snorts in rhythm with your sleepy pulse. You sit up slowly, rubbing your eyes, and that's when the smell hits. Sharp, smoky, slightly sour. A little bitter, too, like the taste of roasted truth. Today's breakfast is hoja, and no, it's not for the faint of tongue. Hoja is an early morning brew, thick as stew and dark as secrets. Technically a porridge, hoja is made from roasted and ground barley flour, which is then boiled with water into a smooth, slightly elastic mixture. It's served steaming hot and often stirred with a touch of nieder kibbeh or a pinch of salt, sometimes spiced, sometimes not. Sometimes thick enough to chew, sometimes thin enough to drink straight from the bowl. Today, it's the chewable kind. You shuffle toward the hearth, where a wide clay pot simmers. A thin stream of steam coils toward the rafters. Your uncle is there before you, already scraping the bottom of his bowl. His lips shine with butter, and he points toward the pot with his spoon like it owes him money. "Still hot," he says. "Don't burn your throat like last time." You remember last time you were impatient. You took a huge spoonful and blew on it once, weakly, then swallowed it like a hero. It scorched your tongue and you couldn't taste anything for 2 days. Live and learn. You sit down, take your bowl, and stir slowly. The hoja is smooth, thick enough to leave trails as you drag the spoon across the top. You bring a bit to your lips, test the temperature, then finally take a bite. It's earthy. Barley always has that grounding, grainy flavor, like it knows it's old, like it was meant to feed monks and farmers and soldiers and dreamers. There's a toasty bitterness from the roasting, but the butter rounds it out, softens the edges. You chew, slowly, thoughtfully. This isn't a breakfast you scarf down, it demands respect, and possibly a nap afterward. Now here's your mainstream historical note. Hoja was a staple for highland Ethiopians, especially in regions where barley grew best, places with chillier mornings and thinner air. It was beloved for its ease of preparation and its staying power. Eat one bowl of hoja, and you're good to work the fields, herd the cattle, or philosophize about the nature of time until noon. It was particularly popular during times of scarcity, when butter and meat were rare and simplicity ruled the table. Monasteries often relied on hoja to break the long overnight fast before morning prayers. It was easy to digest, quick to prepare, and could be made in vast quantities with minimal ingredients. But the quirky bit? In some areas, hoja wasn't just food, it was medicine. Parents used to feed hoja to children with upset stomachs, sometimes mixing in a pinch of charcoal powder. Yes, actual charcoal, to absorb the evil wind. Sounds medieval, but hey, charcoal tablets are still a thing, so maybe Grandma was onto something. Your cousin wanders in, bleary-eyed and blanket-wrapped, and flops next to you with an exaggerated groan. "I dreamed I was stuck in a mud hut, eating nothing but hoja forever," she mutters. "Then I woke up, and the dream continued." She eats it anyway. You notice your aunt slicing green chilies at the side table, tossing them into a bowl of yogurt. She stirs it up with a smile. "For the brave," she says, "or the foolish." She hands you a small dish. You dab a bit on the edge of your hoja, stir it in. It hits your tongue like a slap and a hug at the same time. You blink once, twice. Yup, still foolish. A word on cultural debate. Historians still argue whether hoja is a direct descendant of ancient military rations. Some suggest it came from field-cooked barley mixtures, prepared quickly and eaten on the go. Others believe it originated in monasteries and spread outward from there. Some even speculate it had ceremonial uses, served to honor ancestors or to begin specific religious fasts. The truth is hard to pin down because hoja is one of those foods that's everywhere and nowhere. It belongs to no single class, no single place. Which brings us to the interesting part. Hoja is the great equalizer. Rich or poor, farmer or monk, it shows up in bowls across the board. A nobleman might top it with spice-laced butter, a shepherd might eat it plain with river water, but in essence it's the same. Roasted grain, boiled down, chewed slow. It's a food that doesn't pretend. It's not beautiful. It doesn't float in on platters or get stacked in fancy arrangements. It's humble. It stays hot a long time. It reminds you that sustenance doesn't have to sparkle. As you finish your bowl, scraping the bottom where the hoja has thickened into a kind of grainy crust, you feel unusually clear-headed. Maybe it's the barley. Maybe it's the quiet morning. Or maybe it's because hoja doesn't clutter your system with too much oil or tang, just grain, heat, and breath. Outside, the wind picks up. Clouds roll over the mountains, and someone starts singing a work song low and slow. It's not a melody, you know, but it doesn't matter. It feels right. The kind of song you hum after hoja. Strong, slow, unfancy. You stand, pat your belly, and hand your bowl to your aunt. She pours a ladleful of hot water into it to soak off the sticky remnants. The pot on the hearth still burbles, waiting for the next sleepy soul to shuffle in, and you feel like you could walk to the next village, or nap for 2 hours, or maybe both, in that order, because hoja may not be flashy, but it sticks with you, like a good friend, like the taste of roasted grain on a cold morning, like the memory of fire on your tongue and butter on your lips. The rooster's crow has barely faded into the morning fog when you smell it. Something tart, something ancient, something alive. It's the kind of scent that tickles your memory and your nose at the same time, like the tang of forgotten dreams, fermenting in clay jars. You peek around the corner of the hearth, and there it is, slowly bubbling in a blackened pot. Dufo dabo, but not the spongy, savory bread your cousin made for the wedding feast. No, this is the breakfast version. Smaller, denser, and, brace yourself, fermented overnight. If kinch was a warm blanket and hoja was a rough wool cloak, then dufo dabo is the sour-smelling boots that carried you through yesterday and promised to do it again today. You're not sure whether to trust it, but your stomach rumbles in protest, and that settles the matter. You sit cross-legged near the hearth, watching your grandmother use a piece of firewood to shift hot coals over the domed lid of the clay baking pan. It's like an upside-down oven, and inside, nestled in leaves for steaming, is your prize. A squat, slightly cracked, spiced dufo dabo loaf. Mainstream historical note incoming: dufo dabo is a traditional leavened bread, often baked in rural Ethiopian households using a mix of barley, wheat, or teff flour, whatever was on hand, really. In medieval times, women fermented the dough overnight using a local wild yeast starter called ersho, which was passed down through families like sacred heirlooms. That starter gave the bread a distinct sourness, sharp, tangy, and oddly comforting. Your grandmother cracks the lid open. A warm, yeasty scent rushes out, mixed with steam and smoke. She pries the loaf from the leaves with bare hands, slaps it onto a woven tray, and slices it with a wooden knife. Inside, a dense pale center studded with seeds and pockets of steam. You reach for a slice and pull it apart. The texture is chewy, springy, a little sticky. You chew. Your jaw works harder than it did with kinche or hoja. This is food that needs convincing. But the flavor, oh, it grows on you. Earthy, slightly sour, and spiked with caraway seeds. There's even a faint whisper of garlic. Someone snuck in a clove or two before baking. It's hearty, honest, weirdly addictive. Your uncle dunks his slice into a small bowl of Berber-spiced oil. The red glistens against the golden crust. For strength, he says, like he's about to go fight a bear. You follow his lead. The oil soaks into the bread, mellowing the sour and amplifying the spice. It's breakfast with bite now. Here's a fringe tidbit for you. In some Ethiopian villages, people believed that the success of dufo dabo depended on the mood of the baker. If she was angry, the dough wouldn't rise. If she was grieving, the bread would crack. So women were known to hum blessings or recite prayers while kneading the dough, just to be safe. Your grandmother still does it, murmuring to herself while mixing flour and water, like she's whispering secrets to the bread gods. Some mornings, she swears the dough answers back. You tear off another piece and slather it with niter kiba, the herbed butter that has basically become your favorite food group. It soaks in, melting into the sponge. One bite and you get the tang of fermentation, the warmth of spice, and the buttery richness all in one. It's not subtle. It doesn't try to be. It's not trying to win beauty contests or end up on a royal platter. This bread shows up to work. Your cousin walks in with a cheeky grin and sniffs the air. "Dufo dabo day," she says, hopeful. Your grandmother grunts. Only one loaf, no fighting. A second later, everyone is fighting. Quietly. With elbows. Debate time. Historians still argue whether dufo dabo was more of a special occasion bread or an everyday peasant staple. Some evidence suggests it was used to mark Sabbath mornings, or saints' days, times when families would splurge on longer fermenting and richer ingredients. Others believe it was the practical answer to leftover flour and long nights. Mix it, let it sit, bake it before sunrise. No fuss, just food. Then, there's the lingering question about its yeast culture. Was ersho deliberately cultivated, or did it just happen? Was it passed from generation to generation, or reharvested from the air like some invisible blessing? The truth, probably both. Yeast is sneaky that way. And what about that leaf wrapping? Some say it was about flavor. Others claim it was protection from smoke or ash. Your grandmother, when asked, just shrugs and says, "That's how bread is born." You finish your slice. The crust is firm, the center still warm. You notice your fingertips smell like caraway and wood smoke now. Not a bad way to start the day. The fire is dying down, the coals settling into ash. Your grandmother leans back, satisfied, brushing flour from her hands. Your little cousin tries to swipe the last piece, but gets caught mid-swipe and is sentenced to sweeping the floor. Outside, the mist is lifting. The hills are slowly revealing themselves, patch by patch, like they're stretching after sleep. Someone is already herding goats in the distance, and a group of children is dragging sticks through the mud, laughing too loud for this hour. But in your belly? There's warmth, weight, substance, the kind of breakfast that'll keep you full, even if lunch doesn't come until dusk. The kind that clings to your ribs, your memory, your soul a little bit. And maybe, just maybe, if you hum the right tune while you walk, the next loaf of dufo dabo will rise even better. You wake to the sound of something sizzling, sharp, fast, and relentless. Not the usual gentle bubble of hoja or the low hiss of dufo dabo on coals. No, this sound is urgent. A crackling tempo, like breakfast is trying to summon lightning. You sit up and sniff the air. Butter. Definitely butter. And onions. And something else. Smoky, slightly musky, like dried meat on the verge of becoming legend. Your feet hit the floor before your brain even catches up. You know what this is. You hope what this is. It's kinchot, the rare morning when breakfast comes with a crunch, and possibly a side of whispered family secrets. At the hearth, your aunt is crouched low, flipping pieces of dried beef in a hot clay pan. Every piece, dancing in melted, neater kiba. The beef is dark, nearly black, the kind that's been hanging over the rafters for months. It smells like thyme and wood smoke and patience. She slices a green chili straight into the pan, seeds and all, and the oil snaps louder in protest. "Better eat now," she says, "before the kids smell it." You grab a wooden plate and prepare for glory. Mainstream historical fact first. Kinchot is one of several names used to describe a stir-fry made from quanta, Ethiopian dried beef or lamb. The meat was preserved using salt and smoke, then sliced, thin and stored for months, sometimes longer. In medieval Ethiopia, this kind of dried meat was essential during the dry season or fasting periods, when fresh meat was scarce or forbidden. You could rehydrate it with water, or better yet, fry it in spiced butter for a meal that hit hard and fast. Breakfast versions of kinchot weren't as common as lunch or dinner versions. This was a bit of a luxury, but on feast days or during harvest times when families needed fuel before sunrise, fried quanta became the morning king. You weren't just eating to survive, you were eating to conquer. You pick up a piece. It's charred on the edges, glistening in butter, and coated in just enough chili flakes to make you pause. But only pause. You take the bite. Instant heat. Not just from the spice, but from the actual temperature. Your aunt barely lets it cool. The beef is chewy, full of flavor, and just a little bit gamey in that good ancestral way. The neater kibbeh cuts through it with warmth and fragrance, and then the onion hits, a caramelized sweetness that rounds the whole thing out like a lullaby sung by a warrior. You cough once, the chili stings. Your aunt grins and hands you a jug of warm milk. "Balance," she says. "Also, I may have added too much pepper." You don't complain. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some Ethiopians believed that eating kinchot at sunrise would make you faster. Not just metaphorically, actually faster. As in better at running, herding, even chasing down thieves. There was a whole layer of folklore about speed and stamina being tied to how well-preserved meat was. Maybe it inherited the strength of time itself. Mothers told sons, "Eat your quanta and you'll outrun the hyenas." Some even rubbed dried meat over a baby's ankles to teach the legs courage. True story. Maybe your cousin walks in, sniffs the air, and immediately fakes a limp. "I think my legs forgot courage," she says, reaching for a piece. She doesn't even ask. It's that kind of morning. There's a half loaf of dufodabo on the table, slightly stale, perfect for mopping up the spiced butter. You tear off a piece and do just that, letting it soak before scooping up some crispy onion bits. You chew slowly. Your mouth burns a little. Your heart warms a lot. The fire hisses under the pan. Outside, someone calls for a donkey. A chicken answers, confused but enthusiastic. Debate time again. Historians still argue whether quinchote breakfasts were more common in the north or the south. Some accounts suggest that highland regions with cooler climates dried more meat and thus had more access year-round. Others believe it was a pan-Ethiopian tradition, with variations on spice, oil, and meat type depending on geography. There's also disagreement over when quincho began as a breakfast dish. Some say it's a later development, introduced when preserved meat became more abundant. Others insist it was a fieldworker's classic for centuries. Even the preparation is up for scholarly grabs. Some texts suggest the meat was boiled first to soften it. Others say it was pounded before frying. Your aunt? She scoffs at all of it. Fry it hot, fry it fast, she says. Don't talk too much. There's a simplicity in that philosophy. And yet, this is one of the most complex flavor experiences you've had all week. The layers of smoke, the crunch of garlic, the fat-slicked heat of green chili, all of it plays across your tongue like a drum line. You slow down, not because you're full, because you want it to last. Breakfast like this doesn't come every day. Meat is precious. Butter, too. But time, that's the rarest ingredient in the pot. And this morning, someone spent time to feed you well. Your uncle arrives just in time for the last bite. "Did you leave me any?" he asks. Your cousin throws him a single crispy beef sliver like it's a coin in a wishing well. He catches it with exaggerated reverence. You stretch your legs, your belly satisfied, and your spirit humming with chili and charm. Outside, the sky has turned a pale blue, and the wind smells like dust and cattle. You hear someone sharpening a blade in the distance. Another day begins. But for now, you sit a little longer, sip the last of the warm milk, and trace circles in the spiced oil with your bread crust. Because sometimes, breakfast is a battle. And sometimes, it's a poem fried in butter. You don't smell it first. You hear it. A quiet clink. A wooden spoon scraping a clay bowl. A soft gurgle. Then the unmistakable swish of something being stirred with too much focus for this hour of the morning. The smell comes later. Sweet, warm, vaguely grainy, with the strange sharpness of something that might have been wine in another life. You roll over and squint toward the hearth. Someone's making beso, and not just any beso. This is breakfast beso. Thick, hot, stirred like it's a sacred ceremony and served with a straight face, like it's medicine that forgot to become bitter. You sit up. The floor is cold, but your curiosity is warm. Beso mornings are rare. Not because it's complicated, on the contrary. Beso is about as simple as breakfast gets in medieval Ethiopia. But that's the thing. It's too simple. So it was often reserved for the in-between days. The slow ones. The quiet ones. The ones where your stomach needed settling, or your soul needed steadying. You shuffle over to the fire and crouch beside your aunt, who is gently, lovingly stirring roasted barley, flour into warm water. She doesn't look up, just keeps stirring, one direction only. If you stir it the other way, she whispers, you confuse the spirits. You do not laugh, not this early. Mainstream historical time. Beso is a kind of roasted flour made primarily from barley, though other grains like wheat or even teff could sneak into the mix. It was ground fine, dry roasted over open heat until golden brown, and stored in sealed jars to keep it fresh. In medieval Ethiopia, beso was the go-to food for travelers, warriors, monks, and anyone needing quick fuel. Mixed with water or milk, hot or cold. It became a porridge, a drink, or a paste, depending on how you made it. Breakfast beso was usually hot, mildly sweetened with honey if you were lucky, and sometimes spiced with a little cinnamon or long pepper if your house was feeling fancy. Today, you are lucky. You're handed a bowl. Not quite liquid, not quite solid. It's somewhere in between. A warm, thick slurry with tiny, glistening flecks of honey and roasted grain. You dip your spoon, take a bite, and instantly understand why beso has survived the centuries. It's not exciting, but it's comforting. It tastes like roasted almonds and oat milk got lost together in a forest. It clings to your tongue and your memory. And here's your quirky fact of the morning. In some regions, beso was believed to protect the body from evil winds. Not metaphorical ones, actual winds. Travelers crossing remote highlands would mix beso with water, smear a bit on their foreheads, and chant little verses to ward off whatever invisible trouble might be lurking on the breeze. And if they sneezed right after, that meant the charm worked. No one sneezes now, but someone does start humming, a low, repetitive tune that sounds like a lullaby wearing work boots. Your aunt is still stirring her own bowl, eyes distant, face relaxed. This isn't just breakfast. This is a ritual. You ask her if people ever ate beso cold. She nods. Summer mornings or fasting days. You mix it with sour milk, maybe garlic, drink it fast. Good for the belly, bad for kisses. You make a mental note. Debate time. Historians still argue whether beso was a monk's staple or a noble's travel snack. Some medieval chronicles link it to monasteries, describing long vigils broken only by bowls of beso shared quietly among fasting brothers. Others point to military camps, where beso was packed in leather pouches and stirred with water before dawn marches. The dual nature of the food, holy and handy, makes its origin story hard to pin down. Then there's the question of preparation. Was the flour roasted before or after grinding? Some regions say before, using whole barley grains toasted in pans until they popped like sleepy popcorn. Others insist the flour itself was roasted low and slow, stirring constantly to avoid burning. Your household? They do both. Depends who you ask, your aunt says, smiling, and how much barley you have. Outside, the sky is overcast and heavy, the kind of morning where animals move slower and people speak softer. Your bowl is empty now, but your stomach feels steady, like someone laid a foundation inside you. A neighbor knocks once on the wooden gate, delivers a small sack of roasted chickpeas, and leaves without a word. You pour a few into your palm and pop them in your mouth, salty, crunchy, a perfect chaser to the soft richness of beso. Your uncle appears, a goatskin pouch slung over his shoulder. "I'll be gone 3 days," he says, tying it tight. "You know there's beso inside, dry, packed, ready to be reborn in a stream or a campsite fire." Your little cousin asks for more. She gets half a spoonful and a warning look. Beso must be rationed. It's precious not because it's rare, but because it's reliable. You wander outside, warm from the inside out, and notice a hawk circling above the trees. You imagine it, carrying a tiny clay bowl of beso in its talons, offering it to the clouds. Breakfast for the gods, maybe. Back inside, the fire hisses low. The stirring has stopped. Bowls are wiped clean with crusts of leftover bread. No crumbs left behind. In a world where breakfast can be buttery or spicy or fermented, beso stands out by doing the opposite. It's humble, silent, not trying to be noticed. Just trying to be there when you need it most. A little like you, some days. You wake to the sound of arguing geese. Somewhere beyond the courtyard wall, they're honking like feathered judges at a very poorly defended trial. You pull the blanket over your head, hoping for peace. But it's too late. The morning has started. Again. The scent of injera doesn't hit you yet, nor butter, nor even coffee. What you do catch is sharper, earthy, fermented, and unmistakably vegetal. You frown. This is no butter-fried feast. This is something green. You shuffle to the hearth and find a shallow clay pot, bubbling quietly. The smell is coming from inside. Cabbage, maybe, or collard greens, definitely garlic, and possibly ginger. Your aunt looks up. Gomen furfur, she says, as if that explains everything. And honestly, it kind of does. Today, breakfast is leftovers, but make it glorious. Mainstream historical fact: Gomen furfur was one of the most practical breakfast options in medieval Ethiopian households, especially in Orthodox Christian communities where fasting days filled the calendar. You take stewed greens, often kale, cabbage, or mustard leaves, and mix them with shredded pieces of injera, turning yesterday's scraps into today's sustenance. It's warm, tangy, filling, and, if done right, absolutely delicious. This dish is what you eat when you're not allowed butter, or meat, or milk. It's vegan before vegan was trendy. It's economical before budgeting had apps. And it's surprisingly comforting, like a warm hug from someone who smells faintly of garlic. You dip a finger into the pot and taste. Tangy. A little sour from the aged injera, which has soaked up the juices of the greens. The collards have been cooked low and slow, losing their bitterness and taking on the flavors of onion, garlic, and just enough heat to make you notice. Not spicy enough to wake the dead, just spicy enough to remind you you're alive. You ask your aunt how old the injera is. She shrugs. 3 days, maybe 4. She hands you a cup of warm water with a squeeze of lemon. Good for the digestion, she says. You'll need it. You sit by the fire, tearing off more pieces of injera to mop up the edges of the pot. The meal is simple but layered, texturally soft but punchy in flavor. And then there's the aftertaste. Slightly fermented, pleasantly sour, like the memory of a vinegar dream. Time for a quirky tidbit. Some households added wild nettles or bitter herbs to their gomen furfur as a kind of morning detox, not because of toxins. This isn't a medieval goop ad, but because bitter greens were thought to wake up the blood and cleanse the spirit. One monk reportedly swore by a mixture of gomen furfur and roasted fenugreek leaves, claiming it made him immune to gossip and headaches, which you kind of want to test. Also, fun fringe fact. In some regions, families whispered short prayers over leftover injera before tearing it up for furfur, thanking it for not going moldy. Bread wasn't just food. It was part of the household. And in a way, it was reborn each time it got reused. Outside, the geese are still arguing, possibly over your breakfast, possibly just because they're geese. Your little cousin wanders in, hair sticking out like a hedgehog. She peers into the pot, sniffs and groans. Again? She whines. Your aunt raises an eyebrow. It's gomen furfur, not dessert furfur. Your cousin plops down and eats anyway, because even when you don't want it, it still works. It still fills. It still says, you're not going to bed hungry, which is more than many can say. Debate time. Historians still argue whether furfur dishes began as culinary innovation or desperation. Some suggest it was a sacred practice, born from the cultural and religious importance of never wasting food, especially bread. Others argue it was purely functional. Injera didn't keep well in warm climates, so you had to use it fast or lose it. Then there's the regional question. In the north, furfur often used meat sauces, fit with spicy stew, while in the south, vegetable-based versions like gomen furfur were more popular. But no one agrees on who did it first. What's clear is that furfur had legs. It ran across centuries, across feasting tables and fasting plates alike. You finish your bowl slowly, letting each bite settle into your stomach like a polite tenant. And you realize something. Gomen furfur isn't exciting. It doesn't sparkle or sizzle. It's not spoon-fed at royal courts. But it's probably the most honest breakfast you've had all week. It tastes like a home that stretches every crumb, like a family that doesn't throw things away, like wisdom passed down in a pot with no lid. Your uncle walks in, late, with dusty boots and a sheepish grin. Is it too late for breakfast? Your aunt hands him the pot. Always just in time, she says, and moves on to chopping garlic. For lunch, you step outside, belly full of greens and gratitude, and take a deep breath. The air smells like onions and possibility. The sun isn't quite up yet, but the sky is already blushing. faint streaks of lavender and gold curling around the silhouette of distant acacia trees. You're barely awake, but someone else in the compound clearly is, because the gentle clack-clack of a grinding stone hums through the stillness like a heartbeat. You follow the sound. A young girl, barefoot, alert, is kneeling over a saddle quern, rhythmically working the upper stone back and forth. She doesn't look up, just keeps grinding, and you recognize the grain right away by the smell alone. It's teff. Of course it's teff. This is Ethiopia, after all, where teff is more than a crop. It's culture, it's ritual, it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And this morning you're getting a very special version of it. Not the spongy injera pancakes you're used to, but something else. Something fluffier, denser, richer. You're getting kinche. Not everyone had kinche in medieval Ethiopia, but when they did, it meant someone had the luxury of time. Kinche is cracked grain porridge, traditionally made from barley or wheat, but occasionally, especially in wealthier or more food-secure households, made from cracked teff. The tiny grains are roasted lightly, crushed just enough to split them open, and then boiled into a thick, savory porridge. Mainstream historical fact: kinche wasn't just breakfast. It was a prestige dish. Preparing it took time and skill, and it was usually reserved for feast days or mornings after religious fasts. Think of it as the culinary equivalent of turning your notifications off and actually tasting your morning. The pot over the fire is already bubbling when you sit down. A woman adds a pinch of salt, then spoons in a dollop of neater kibbeh, clarified butter infused with garlic, fenugreek, cardamom, and sometimes a touch of dried basil. The sizzling aroma fills the courtyard instantly. This is not subtle food. This is food that announces itself like royalty entering a room. You glance into the pot. The kinche is swelling, plump grains barely holding their shape, creamy and glistening, under the sheen of melted butter. It smells like roasted grain, warm spice and indulgence. You're handed a clay bowl, still hot to the touch. You blow on a spoonful, then take a bite. And for a moment, you forget what century you're in. The texture is perfect, tender but toothsome. The butter melts across your tongue, carrying a slow wave of spice and savor. And that salt, just enough to anchor the flavors. You glance around. The entire household has shown up for this one. Even the usually grumpy grandfather who never wakes before noon is sitting with a bowl in hand, nodding silently between bites. No one says much. They're too busy eating. Now here's your quirky fringe tidbit. Some monks believe that kinche, especially when eaten after a long fast, had spiritual properties. One 14th century manuscript mentions a hermit who saw light in his sleep after eating a bowl of kinche laced with wild garlic. Whether it was the divine or just strong digestion is still up for debate. Another strange custom? Some households whispered the name of their ancestors before adding the butter. To remind the grain who fed us first, they'd say. It's a little spooky, sure, but it also gives the meal a quiet, sacred weight. Speaking of debate, historians still argue whether kinche began as a festive meal or a way to stretch ingredients. Some point to its inclusion in religious feasts and dowry menus, calling it a noble dish. Others argue that cracked grain was easier to cook with minimal fuel, making kinche a practical, no-waste breakfast. What no one debates is this: kinche was, and still is, a comfort food. Back in the courtyard, someone passes around a bowl of soft, sweetened yogurt to dollop onto the kinche. The tartness cuts through the butter, a luxurious contrast. You notice your little cousin swirling hers into a spiral, then licking the spoon like it's dessert. It's not a traditional combination, but it works. Like poetry wearing boots. The fire pops. The dog snores. Someone starts humming. The kinche begins to vanish. It's hard not to be philosophical when you're full of roasted grain and garlic. You find yourself thinking about how a single teff seed is about the size of a strawberry's freckle, and yet, sown by hand, harvested with sickles, threshed with hoof and patience, it becomes this, a bowl of warmth and history and mourning. You look up and notice a visitor arriving, tall, draped in a worn woolen shama, dust clinging to his sandals. He's offered a bowl of kinche without a word. That's how hospitality works here. No questions, no fanfare. Just food, offered warm and without conditions. You ask your aunt if kinche is ever made without butter. Of course, she says. On fasting days we use oil, or just plain. But don't ask me to enjoy it. The visitor nods in agreement as he eats. Maybe he's had a long road. Maybe he's here to sell something. But for now, he's just a man with breakfast. You finish your bowl, the last spoonful cooled and thickened at the bottom. Still delicious. You scrape the sides clean with a sliver of flatbread and sit back, full and a little drowsy. It's not even mid-morning yet, and already the day feels like it's been hugged. Your feet are bare again, brushing against smooth, dusty earth as you step past the kitchen stones, still warm from the morning's fire. Someone is sweeping the courtyard with a bundle of stiff twigs. Someone else is giggling. Probably your cousin, trying to balance a clay jug on her head with all the seriousness of a royal procession. The day's rhythm has begun. But your stomach? Still thinking about food. Lucky for you, breakfast in medieval Ethiopia wasn't always one and done. Sometimes, if the morning was long, or the weather cool, or the guests many, a second breakfast would quietly happen. And if you were fortunate, or just a particularly persuasive child, you might catch it. Today, your nose leads you toward something sharp, sour, and kind of funky in the best possible way. You've found dufo dabo, and it's not like any bread you've seen before. It's round, massive, baked dark with a crust you could probably defend yourself with. The smell? Wild. Fermented dough, the tang of wood smoke, a little sweetness, and something leafy because this bread, it's baked in leaves. You crouch next to the woman preparing it. She's lifting the domed lid off a flat mitad, the traditional baking griddle that sits like a disc on glowing embers. Inside, the loaf has been resting on fresh enset leaves, large and banana-like, which give the bread a moist underside and a subtle green aroma. She flicks the bottom of the loaf, listening for a hollow sound. Then she taps the top. Not done. She places the lid back gently and throws a few embers on top for even baking. 10 more minutes, she says. Go chase chickens if you're bored. Mainstream historical fact. Dufo dabo was a festive bread often reserved for market days, births, or important guests. It was made from wheat or barley flour, sometimes sorghum, mixed with a bit of honey or molasses, and left to rise using wild fermentation. The result? A dense, tangy loaf that could hold its own against any soup or stew. And yes, sometimes people had it for breakfast, especially when hosting travelers. After all, who wouldn't want to start their day with bread thick enough to double as armor? When the bread is finally ready, it's lifted from the mitad like a sacred relic. A thin crust of leaf sticks to the bottom, adding a rustic touch. The inside is steaming, soft, sour, and slightly sweet. You're given a hunk the size of your fist and a cup of telba, a warm flaxseed drink that's nutty, silky, and oddly filling. You dip the bread in the telba and take a bite. Oh, this is good. The crust crackles, then gives way to that spongy, fermented middle. It tastes old in the best way, like something made by generations, like bread that remembers things. Fringe tidbit. Some families secretly added a splash of tej, that golden honey wine, into the dough for extra fermenting power. And yes, it made the breakfast bread slightly boozy. And no one complained. You weren't drinking, it was just bread. Very happy, slightly giggly bread. Also, legend has it that one royal cook, sometime in the 1400s, used beer yeast from a monastery to create a dufo dabo loaf, so light and fluffy it caused actual debate at court. Some accused him of using foreign wheat, others of sorcery. He was cleared when he made the loaf again in front of witnesses. Still, people never trusted that airy bread. Quite the same after. You tear another piece. The telba's warmth coats your throat, calming and rich. It's made from ground flax seeds boiled with water and sometimes seasoned with a touch of garlic or ginger. Think of it as Ethiopia's version of oat milk, only thicker, more earthy, and definitely medieval. Nearby, the woman who baked the bread picks off a chunk and mutters, "Too much rice. Should have added more salt." You look at your perfect wedge of steamy joy and shake your head. Some people are just born critics. A scholarly debate brews in your mind as you chew. Historians still argue whether dufo dabo began as a rural ceremonial bread or an urban luxury. Some trace it to highland villages where enset trees grew, giving the baker natural pans in the form of leaves. Others point to monastic chronicles that mention sweet round bread served during holidays, indicating a wealthier urban origin. What we do know, the bread traveled through families, rituals, and maybe even trade routes. It arrived hot, hearty, and ready to be shared, and always, always best enjoyed warm. Your little cousin runs past again, this time with a chicken feather in her hair and no explanation. The bread vendor from the road peeks into the courtyard. "I smell leaf bread," he calls. The woman waves him in. "Too late," she says, mouthful, but she gives him a piece anyway. You wrap up the last bite, hands sticky with telba and crumbs, and sit back against the wall. The second breakfast has filled more than your belly. It's filled that dreamy part of you that believes mornings can be slow, generous, and full of unexpected delights. Like bread baked in leaves, you lean back against the cool mud wall, belly warm with bread and flaxseed, when you hear it again, the unmistakable ping-ping of metal on ceramic. Someone's setting up for something. Not lunch, not quite yet. Something smaller, lighter. You stretch and wander toward the sound, rounding a stack of firewood and nearly tripping over a goat tied to a stick. And there it is, a coffee circle forming. You blink. It's barely mid-morning, and yet here we go again. Welcome to one of medieval Ethiopia's proudest traditions, the bunna ceremony. This isn't just having coffee. This is coffee elevated to high art, full ritual, and delicious drama. You settle onto a woven mat, cross-legged. A young girl is carefully arranging the setup, green coffee beans laid out to roast, a clay jabina resting nearby, and a bundle of incense smoldering low, filling the air with a heady swirl of frankincense and wood smoke. Mainstream historical fact: Ethiopia is the birthplace of coffee, and even in medieval times, locals treated it with reverence. This early version wasn't always prepared as it is today, but the seeds of the tradition, pun fully intended, go deep. Whether sipped, chewed, or steeped, bunna became a central part of social, spiritual, and even political life. The beans are roasted in a flat pan over the fire, and soon the courtyard smells like toasted earth and warm heaven. Someone leans over to waft the aroma toward their face. You follow suit. It's not just part of the ritual. It's your personal invitation to wake up, connect, and savor. As the beans crackle, a fringe tidbit floats through your memory. There were some medieval Ethiopian monks who reportedly chewed raw coffee cherries to stay awake during long prayer vigils. They claimed it kept their minds sharp and their thoughts clear. You can't help but wonder how much of that was caffeine, and how much was sheer monastic stubbornness. When the beans are dark enough, they're ground with a mortar and pestle, tap tap clack, and scooped into the jabina along with water and sometimes cardamom. The neck of the pot is long, the base round. It's not built for speed. It's built for anticipation. As the coffee boils, stories begin. A neighbor's cousin saw a leopard last week. A visiting priest once met a lion and fed it bread. You raise your eyebrows, but no one's joking. Or maybe they are. It's hard to tell. Then, shh, the pot's ready. A slow pour begins. Careful not to spill a drop. The first round is strong, rich, and slightly gritty at the bottom. This one's called Abel, the strongest of the three traditional rounds. Historians still argue whether the three-round coffee ritual had firm roots in the medieval era or evolved later under Christian and Islamic cultural exchanges. Some believe the trilogy of pours, abol, tona, and baraka, symbolized hospitality, community, and blessing from early on. Others argue that in medieval times, coffee may have been more utilitarian, boiled fast, shared quickly, just enough to keep marching. But here, in this courtyard, it's clear. Bunna is an experience. You sip carefully. It's dark, sharp, with hints of charcoal and spice. No sugar, no milk. Just the bean in its truest form. You feel it ripple through your system like a drumbeat. Then comes tona, the second pour. Milder, softer, more communal. By now everyone is laughing, nibbling on roasted barley or kolo. Crunchy, salted grains served in a carved wooden bowl. It's not quite a meal, not quite a snack, just enough to keep your mouth busy between stories. A small child is sent to fetch more incense. A goat bleats at nothing. The sun inches higher, warming the tops of everyone's heads. You squint and realize how time bends here. A half hour feels like a chapter. There's a legend someone shares about a shepherd named Kaldi, who noticed his goats dancing after eating red berries from a bush. You smirk. You've heard it before. Everyone has. But still, it's a crowd pleaser, especially when someone mimes the dancing goat, and then, with hushed voices, the baraka round begins. The final pour, the blessing. It's weak, almost watery but symbolic. This cup seals the gathering like a soft whisper at the end of a long conversation. It's the coffee you drink not for taste, but for closure. You sip it slowly, then tip the cup forward, signaling you're finished. The host nods. A few people stretch. Someone else starts roasting a few more beans, because honestly, who's going to stop them? You glance down at your cup and remember a curious belief from a mountain village elder that if you spill coffee during a bunna ceremony, it's a sign someone far away is thinking of you. You look at the drops on your mat. Maybe you're popular. Another debate drifts across your thoughts. Some scholars question whether coffee culture was as widespread across all Ethiopian regions during the medieval period as it is today. Certain lowland communities reportedly preferred chat, a stimulating leaf chewed for alertness. Others leaned into honey wine or even fermented grain drinks in the morning. The spread of bunna, they argue, might have been gradual, not universal, but once it took root, oh, it thrived. You rise slowly, lightheaded from the coffee and the slow hypnosis of the ceremony. You feel good, tethered, grounded, as if the world paused for an hour and remembered itself. And now, of course, you're starving again. Coffee does that. You stand up, your legs a little wobbly from the bunna rounds, especially the third one, the whispery blessing cup that somehow always feels more powerful than the first. The courtyard's shade is shrinking, giving way to that highland sun that scorches without apology. You brush a few kolo crumbs from your lap and glance toward the hills. It's still technically morning. Barely. But after bread, flaxseed, and coffee, you're now ready to enter the wildcard zone of medieval Ethiopian breakfasts. The savory side, the heavy hitters, the stews and proteins, the dishes that could be breakfast, lunch, or something in between. This is where things get meaty, sometimes literally. You duck into a side room where a pot is bubbling low over coals. It smells like garlic, berbere, and memories of something spicy that once made you cry. A hand gestures you closer. A woman lifts the lid. Oh boy. It's shiro, the humble chickpea stew that can taste like comfort food or a dare, depending on how heavy the spice ladle fell. You're handed a bowl and a flat piece of yesterday's injera to use as a spoon. This isn't a meal, it's a declaration. Mainstream historical fact. Shiro, made from powdered legumes like chickpeas or broad beans, was a common staple throughout the highlands. In medieval Ethiopia, it was affordable, filling, and adaptable. Eaten by clergy, farmers, and even nobility when meat wasn't available or during fasting periods. It could be plain or fancy, garlic heavy or gently simmered with onions and oil, depending on what was in the pantry. Your bite is hot, literally and figuratively. Spices hit the back of your throat like a slow drum roll. But oh, the flavor. Earthy, creamy, with a kick from the berbere that feels like it's politely asking to stay in your chest all day. Next to you, someone adds niter kibbe, that fragrant, spiced, clarified butter that turns everything it touches into a celebration. You follow suit. It melts on contact, adding nutty richness and a bit of, why is this not served at every birthday ever, to your bowl? But hold on, we're not done. A thin strip of quanta, dried beef, is being rehydrated in a smaller pot nearby. It's jerky, essentially, but not like the leathery stuff in modern plastic bags. This is artisan meat, dried with care, sometimes spiced before being strung above a fire for days. It can be chopped into stews, fried on the side, or just chewed. As is with injera. Fringe tidbit, some families would flavor their quanta with fenugreek smoke, believing it helped preserve the meat and ward off evil spirits. And let's be honest, anyone who's ever been hangry at breakfast knows a food that keeps evil away is just good strategy. You tear a strip of quanta and dip it into your shiro, pretending you're not sweating just a little from the heat. You are? It's fine. No one here is judging. The room grows louder as more people file in. Someone pours tella, a traditional barley beer, not to get drunk, but to share. In medieval Ethiopia, low-alcohol grain beers were often drunk in the morning with hearty food, especially during festivals or after labor. They were seen as energizing, sort of like cereal, if cereal had a mood. Historians still argue whether early tella was brewed for daily use or saved for ritual and celebration. Some accounts say it flowed freely at market days and weddings. Others suggest only heads of households had the right to brew it, and that misuse was punished, socially at least, by whispered judgment and a lack of future invites. You take a sip. It's tangy, cloudy, a little sour, like kombucha's older cousin who once led a battle charge. There's more food than you expected for a morning snack. That's the thing with medieval Ethiopian meals. They flex. What begins as breakfast might evolve into brunch, then into lunch without ceremony. It's not a schedule. It's a state of hunger and hospitality. And it wasn't just for villagers. Even royal courts sometimes began the day with simple stews and flatbreads before moving to meat and beer. Accounts of Emperor Amdaseon's kitchen include records of lentil dishes, fava-based broths, and grain-heavy porridges served in the morning alongside herbal infusions. You peek outside and spot a young boy picking Tina Adam, or Adam's Health, a strongly scented herb with parsley vibes that often flavored both food and medicine. He drops some into a nearby pot like he owns the place. And maybe he does. Culinary confidence runs deep here. As you finish your shiro and chase it with a last bite of quanta, you notice how your hands smell. Spices, smoke, maybe a little niter kibbe. You wouldn't trade that for 1,000 forks and knives. You sit back, belly full, soul soothed, and realize this was breakfast. Not in a modern sense of cereal in a box or cold toast on the way to school. This was communal, generous, rooted in land, labor, and the quiet magic of making do. You remember the coffee, the bread baked in leaves, the chickpea stew now warming your entire torso. You remember the laughter around the bunna circle and the quiet sizzle of garlic hitting butter in a clay pot. And maybe this, you think, is the whole point of breakfast. To gather, to taste, to honor the start of something, even if it's just another dusty Tuesday in the Highlands. You stand, stretch. The day is calling, but a small part of you hopes breakfast takes just a little longer to end. You step back out into the sunlight, still licking the last taste of niter kibbe off your teeth. Your feet crunch against the gravel as you walk the edge of the village, past a few donkeys, a huddle of sleepy chickens, and a toddler wrapped tightly in a shawl, blinking up at the sky like it owes him something. And now, at the edge of it all, away from the bunna circle, the bubbling pots, the smell of charcoal and toasted spice, it's quiet, but not empty. Just the kind of quiet that makes you notice everything. Because in these final sips of the morning, there's one last thread in the breakfast tapestry. the spiritual rituals that wrapped around food like smoke around incense. Even now, a bell rings faintly in the distance. Monks, maybe. Or just the neighbor signaling that the goats are finally behaving. In medieval Ethiopia, meals were never just meals, especially breakfast. There were rhythms, blessings, taboos, and not just in the churches or monasteries, but at every hearth. Mainstream historical fact. Ethiopia's medieval food customs were deeply influenced by Orthodox Christian fasting and feasting cycles. In fact, most of the calendar was broken into fast days and feast days. On a typical Wednesday or Friday, the faithful avoided animal products entirely. No milk, no meat, no butter. You remember that shiro stew? That's why it was so important. It was filling and fully vegan, centuries before veganism became a TikTok trend. But it wasn't all solemn abstinence. On feast days, breakfast might feature meat stews, honey mead, and dabo, rich wheat loaves soaked in spice-infused broth and served with butter on top so golden it looked like sunlight you could chew. These were mornings of rejoicing, of taste, and community, and the deeply human joy of finally biting into something you've been waiting days to eat. You find a quiet corner beneath a fig tree and sit. A breeze flutters the edge of your robe. The smell of incense still lingers in your hair, and for a moment, you can imagine what it was like waking up in a medieval monastery. Cool stone beneath your feet, the whisper of prayer, and maybe, just maybe, a monk sneaking you a sliver of honey-soaked barley cake on your birthday. Fringe tidbit? In some villages, it was believed that the first food you ate in the morning shaped your entire day. Eat bitter herbs, and expect arguments. Eat sweet dates or honey, and kindness would follow you like a shadow. This might be why so many people started their days with tej, a soft, sweet mead, just in case the universe was in a good mood. You glance up and watch as a group of young boys returns from the hills, bundles of firewood on their backs. Their laughter rises like birdsong. One of them carries a pouch. If you squint, you can see what's inside. Inset root shavings, wrapped in leaves, and destined to be fermented into kocho bread. It'll take weeks, even months, before it's ready to eat. But that's breakfast planning. Medieval style. Historians still argue whether these spiritual and symbolic rituals were universally practiced or varied wildly from village to village. Some point to regional fasting calendars, oral traditions, and differing interpretations of scripture. Others argue that breakfast rituals were less about dogma and more about deeply held habits, passed from grandmother to child like the rhythm of a lullaby. Back in the monastery kitchens, the daitaras, those half-priests, half-scribes, may have debated whether a single drop of butter invalidated a fasting dish. You wonder how many breakfasts ended in theological debates. Probably more than a few. But for you now, it's simpler. You think of the injera fermented in clay pots for days, the chickpea powder ground just before dawn, the coffee roasted over, fire and poured with deliberate grace. You think of the hands that prepared it all, older hands, younger hands, sometimes trembling, sometimes deft. You think of the smell of smoke, the low chanting in ge'ez, and the laughter that rose even in hard times. You're full, but not just from food. You're full of a morning lived slowly, of bread that took days to make and seconds to eat, of beans that crossed centuries to land in your cup, of herbs that healed and flavored, of butter that melted like a soft secret. So you lean back, close your eyes, and breathe in the last of the morning. Someone nearby is already preparing lunch. A pan scrapes, a bird chirps, a goat complains because that's what goats do, and you've eaten like royalty and monk alike. You've drunk with villagers and whispered prayers with farmers. You've tasted the past. And now, it's time to let it settle. Wind down. 300 ye words. The sun slips higher into the sky, casting soft gold across the hilltops as shadows stretch and yawn. The buzz of the village slows, and even the birds seem quieter now. You sit beneath the fig tree, warm earth beneath you, belly content and mind gently humming with the stories of ancient breakfasts. There's something soothing about how the morning unfolded. No rush, no noise, just the soft, deliberate acts of making, sharing, and savoring. You can almost feel the cool clay cup in your hand again. Smell the roasted beans, hear the gentle rhythm of a pestle against stone. The breeze carries the distant scent of herbs and firewood. It flutters across your skin like a whispered lullaby. Somewhere a bell chimes, one last note to close the morning, to mark that gentle shift between before and after. You stretch your legs and lean back, eyes half closed. Now, the past doesn't feel so far away anymore. It's wrapped around you like a shawl, woven from steam and bread, from the low hum of bunna conversations, from the laughter over spilled tella. In this quiet moment, time feels soft, like warm injera folding over chickpea stew. Nothing sharp, nothing rushed, just the slow, tender unfolding of a day that began with breakfast. Let it fade, let it settle, let it rest.